and welcome to impromptu episode of Occult podcast, a podcast where we do and talk about inadvisable things in the name of magical science. As always, I'm Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow.
This is Felix S. Warren. Felix suffocating Warren. I am being surrounded by bad gas.
Our methane travails have not ended. And we decided to live record an episode talking about that.
It's very important that we help people understand that methane exposure is very dangerous, and also that its effects are not very well documented.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have bad audio for a second, so I'm going to mute the mic. Nah.
So,
I spare them the sound of the cracking can.
I say make them go through it. Now we can make this be the podcast. So methane has a lot of effects on everyone. Now, if you have psychic abilities that you're paying attention to, then you're going to have some noticeable effects on those abilities. Mm-hmm. Now, I believe everybody has psychic abilities, and they're just not paying attention to them if they don't say they're a psychic.
Right.
So if you don't think you're a psychic, but you have a whole bunch of stuff that seems a lot like time travel, maybe reconsider that. So methane exposure, we should mention how this even happened.
Yeah. So in the house that Felix used to own, that we lived in for a long time, it had 2 gas-powered fireplaces.
I'm not sure if we have to go through all of that. I just meant like how we got not the original exposure. I'm not going through all of that.
All the way back?
Not.
No.
Methane times upset me. So 2 years ago, we moved out of that house, and that house had a sewage flood and some gas stoves and some other shit going on. Well, not stoves, but they were fireplaces.
Yes.
There was a high amount of methane exposure in the house. It has been documented and agreed upon by authorities. And we had to pack up all of our stuff very quickly, move to a new place. And then whenever we moved to a new place, we would get randomly exposed to the methane whenever we would open up boxes. And then we cleaned all that out, and all the stuff got out of the boxes, and they no longer were filled with methane, and we thought we were safe. So today I dared to open an old journal that I kept back in the methane times, and it turns out that if you have books that were open when exposure to methane happened, they save up the methane inside them.
Yes, they keep them in them. Like horrible little vaults.
Do I sound irate? These are the effects of the gas.
So, yeah, we opened a journal of Felix's, hoping to get some insight into some of the psychological stuff that was going on during that time period, and instead, we both get a face full of methane.
Yeah, because I read through it earlier this morning before
and then
you got
handed
up.
It off.
And then I was like, yeah, I was writing
This is like the shittiest, like, Adam and Eve story.
No. You can't skip all the stuff that happened on your end.
I know.
You said you had a dream that had to do with a topic. And I was like, yeah, I was just reading my journal that I was keeping 2 years ago during the methane stuff where I was talking about that topic. Here is me talking about that topic that was in your dream last night.
And then methane exposure. So, yeah. It's always fun.
The thing about methane exposure is that we have noticed that we basically get exposed to it before we get exposed to it.
Yeah.
You had a dream. I've had a couple of things happening where it seems like the methane exposure. It seems like symptoms of the methane exposure, but before it actually happened, because methane really seems very time warpy.
Yes. And part of it is because, from our speculation, it affects the brainstem.
Yeah.
Basically, methane is created from decomposing material, or, pretty much any of the things that they call quote unquote natural gas is basically gas from decomposing either organic matter, usually, plant matter and stuff, that gets trapped under rock, and then we tap it and we burn it.
And, just officially, so you know, natural gas is methane.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you look it up, they will say it's a bunch of gases. That's not true. Natural gas is methane. It is a commercial name for the chemical methane. There may sometimes be other gases mixed in depending upon how they're transporting it or depending on what they tested. But it's frickin' methane.
Yeah.
Every time I see it, written oh, it's some other gases too, it's either someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, or it's a company that doesn't want you to think so much about the fact that, yes, you have methane pumped into your house, you set it on fire, and that's what a natural gas stove is.
Yeah.
Am I mad? Yes. I think that probably always I will be aggro when there's methane exposure.
Yes.
I do not know any other me that is occurring.
And unfortunately, it does have what we've discovered, some hallucinatory, mind-altering effects. And as I have said several times before, I do have a family history of psychosis, and any kind of hypnotic-inducing hallucinatory drug or anything like that does affect me very differently. And so I had a little bit of a dissociative episode, I guess is the easiest way to put it.
Like today?
Yeah.
I am having a little bit of... My memory is fucked. So could you talk about that?
Yeah. So, basically... I was having a hard time connecting with my body, which is the basics of dissociative episodes. It was very hard to remember how to do basic things for the body, like give it food, even hey, I can just cuddle a cat, anything that involves self-awareness of hey, I'm in a highly agitated state was just not there. I literally had to have a cat crawl on me before I remembered that we had cats in the house that I could cuddle.
That does not surprise me. Methane tends to put somebody in the survival mode. Mm-hmm. Now, there's several parts of the brain that can do that. The amygdala is one of them. That's not what methane tends to influence. The amygdala is paranoia, quick thought, lightning decisions.
So I also have anxiety, and that almost feels like hyper awareness of your body. Everything is horrible.
I think it's fight and flight.
Yeah, but this was not that.
Yeah.
This was not anxiety. This was just straight up
So the brain stem is the other part of your brain that can be affected for survival mode, and I think that it basically rules over freeze.
Yeah.
And with methane, I mean, it would make sense survival-wise for you to have an instinct not to physically freak out and do a whole bunch of stuff, because it's a bad situation to kind of be in, to be doing a lot. I think basically slow moving, get out of there. I had the instinct to get out of the house and go pick fruit and stuff. You had the instinct to turn on the air conditioning and filter the air.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the instinct to do flight. I slowly packed to get out there. And whenever I went out and walked picking, I very deliberately slowly did things. At one point I remember just telling myself, just walk as slow as you can through this part. Just take it really slow. And I mean, that's a really good instinct, because if I had gone fast, if I had done a lot of labor and effort, it would have burned a lot more calories, and that would have processed more of the methane.
Right.
Whereas now I think I'm more likely to pass it through my system as opposed to burning it.
Yeah.
Digesting it,
and you
as it
also were outside where you could get a lot of that air transfer out of your lungs. So.
Yeah. I cough a lot of it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I get really phlegmy whenever there's methane exposure.
Yes. And that's often something we noted that, like, looking back on things, that the effects of methane sort of waxed and waned. And the times where it was the worst were the times where we had to close up the place in order to keep heat in. So good ventilation is always a great thing. And when we've posted about this online, I want to discuss this in particular. A lot of people have said, have blamed our symptoms on carbon dioxide.
Carbon monoxide, you mean?
Carbon monoxide poisoning.
That's just a different damn thing altogether.
Yeah.
You don't know how to open up a book or a Wikipedia.
Because carbon monoxide is basically made from the burning, and none of the stuff was burning.
Yeah, carbon monoxide is whenever you have an outdoor heater that you end up...
Yeah.
Like, basically, you don't ventilate properly for
with
a
it
burning
after
thing.
It's burning.
So
but we were not the natural gas stuff was not on.
So, I don't know what you mean by that, but natural gas and carbon monoxide are just two different chemicals altogether.
Right.
So when you say the methane stuff wasn't on...
Like, people have been saying, well, because you had it, like, burning and not ventilating properly.
No, they're just full of
carbon
shit.
monoxide. So
If those people can look up the symptoms for carbon monoxide poisoning and find out that we would have just been dead.
Mm-hmm.
With carbon monoxide poisoning, you slowly lose consciousness and then you just fucking die.
Yeah.
You don't get hallucinations, you don't get into arguments, you don't say the F word a lot on the podcast and act irate towards your wonderful husband who is also your co-host. You don't curse out random people on Tumblr who aren't even listening and tell them to go read Wikipedia.
See, we're trying to put a positive spin on this, partially because we've been dealing with this for years. So it's like, yep, here we go again.
Listen to any previous episode of this podcast. We are acting and talking differently.
Very, very different.
And I've honestly been trying to kind of demonstrate to people how it affects you. Changes is not what I want, because, like, you're the same person with methane exposure, but your ability to filter is fucked. Your
ability to, if you've got any sort of psychic gifts, including those that are, like, predictive or time in nature, basically time gets really weird.
Your grasp of time gets very weird. So the brainstem doesn't know so much about linear time, and neither does the amygdala. But if they all three work together, they get it. If you have any kind of, like, exposure to a hypnotic or a psychotic, then that can break the connection between the three.
Right.
With methane, it's like... This is something that your body tries to tell you to get away from.
Yes. And
in a way that keeps you safe. Because you and I are using psychic abilities so much, like, our psychic abilities are also trying to help. Sometimes they were trying to help 3 weeks ago.
Yes. So, one of the things that I have found that I am especially able to do is emotional displacement. Why it's more of a psychic gift than an actual, like, brain coping mechanism is that I put some of my emotional displacement before the event happens. Like, the dream that I had that Felix mentioned actually helped me process some things ahead of time that would have definitely made things more difficult, because often methane exposure exacerbates any sort of CPTSD or any sort of, like, triggering event, especially since I am in general prone to flashbacks. So feeling like I am physically in the situation or in the environment that I was in during times of trauma is something that I have to deal with. And methane makes that markedly worse. So being able to process the emotional trauma in the dreamscape ahead of time means that I didn't have to deal with it now.
I find it interesting. Your precog did not try to avoid the exposure.
Right.
It knew the exposure would happen, and it tried to help you with the exposure.
Yes. Because there have been times in the past where my precog has tried to avoid the exposure, and because I didn't understand, like, there is a level of logic, basic understanding that needs to filter through the brain in order for certain things to work. And I really feel like understanding that this is methane and not some, like, woogity, shit has actually helped my precog.
Yeah. So, and the thing with methane is that it can actually bring on woogity shit.
Yeah.
It is a portal. Death is a portal, etc. Like, methane is a death gas.
Yes.
It's a gas formed by things dying and decomposing. So, that portal is there where it exists, which means that anything that usually might have a little bit more difficulty interacting with our linear physical reality will suddenly find it much easier.
Yes.
And we had that randomly happen when it came to the previous methane exposure. We had no idea it was happening, and whatever influences were just able to come in whenever.
Yes. And I just thought of, like, when we were doing research on, like, methane exposure and, like, some of the psychoactive effects, one of the things that came up was Oracle of Delphi. Like,
oh, they thought that maybe...
They built the temple on top of volcanic vents. Which, yep. I mean... or different kind of vents, like natural gas vents, things like that, where there was a noticeable shift in mental acuity, I guess.
Yeah, so it was mountainous area. Yeah. And I've seen some debate on whether or not they did that, but by this point, I'ma just say, like, yeah, they probably had somebody regularly exposed to gas that was always there and had figured out a way to make that work. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. I don't want to regularly have the methane thing happening, no. But it is in all of my stuff, in all of my valuable occult books that I need to read and use for research, and in some cases absolutely cannot replace because they're the only extant copy that one could even find. So I have to air all those books out. When I'm doing that, I'm gonna get exposed to methane. And so, like, at this point, I'm at this stage where I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, does St. John's wort tea help with this?
Yeah.
So far, I think yes.
Yeah.
I'm on it right now.
We've been using different things that we know from, like, modern science, medicine, herbology, anything that we can, not herbology.
It's herbalism.
That's Harry Potter.
we could talk about places where magic is real anytime you want, really. It's that kind of episode. Yeah. But yeah. So, like, when it came to the St. John's wort tea, that was my psychic ability trying to help me out. A couple of days ago, I already was picking this, trying to make St. John's wort something.
Yep.
Ended up trying to start an oil that's going to take 2 weeks, and then I was like, I want to go pick more right now, and it turned out not to be the greatest time to do it, but the reason I wanted to go pick more right now is because I wanted to already have it in my house for now. So earlier, when I felt like going and picking stuff, I ran across the patch of St. John's wort, and I got a whole bunch of it, and I boiled it into a tea, and I'm drinking it right now.
Yep.
It's supposed to help with depression as well as some other stuff, but I've mainly seen it, like, hugely effective against depression in my research.
Depression, which, like, often comes with some dissociative elements.
I have a suspicion, mm-hmm. like a theory that the brainstem is likely to be more depressive if it's doing flight, or if it's doing its survival skill, which is freeze.
Yeah.
I think that's depressive. The amygdala is anxious,
which is flight.
It's reactive, fight or flight.
Yeah. Yeah, so I really think that, like, it's super important to document this stuff while we're having exposure to it.
Usually I would document it in a journal, but all of my journals are full of methane. Why do I keep losing all of my journals? You've watched this happen.
I've had this happen.
Yeah.
We've watched each other do this so many times.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we decided to record some of this live. And I mean, this also interfered with our connection through channeling and summoning, because when you are personally being affected by a mind-altering substance, the things that you experience, the channelings that you do, the summonings that you witness, those are different as well.
Yeah, so if you have somebody come through you while you're under influence of a substance, they are also under influence of the substance.
Yes.
There is a little bit of change. Like, they will, if they have a body they're projecting from, then if their body was sober when they project in to your non-sober body, then some of that sobriety they will take with them.
Right.
If they try to take the substance or are exposed to the substance while they're channeled into your body, that will affect their body where they're channeling from.
Right.
And so we didn't really figure out which guests we might have today. I've sent up a notice to the spirits that I connect to, that, like, hey, it's methane day, so if you come down, it's methane day.
Mm-hmm.
And I received some advice, like, telepathically got, like, Mantis giving me, like, some advice while I was out picking. But I haven't really received, like, a signal up or down as to whether anybody wants to come over during this.
Yeah, everyone always seems a little bit gun-shy once they understand what they had experienced during the methane times was due to methane.
Well, whatever it is that they... Like, if somebody comes over here, they're going to bring a little bit of that methane back where they go.
Right.
And so they're going to have to be treated for exposure
right.
where, on their end of things. And, like... that's why I keep on overhearing Mantis debating whether or not he's going to come over. Because on the one hand, oh no, but on the other hand, science.
Right.
Also, we're probably going to be opening these methane boxes pretty soon. We have to go through this stuff, and so the spirits that we work with, they help us with this. They also come over here and live here, basically. They do stuff with us. So we kind of have to figure out how to deal with the methane stuff, and we're doing it live on a podcast because science.
Magical science.
So
this is definitely an inadvisable thing, but this is part of what we have to deal with. Yeah. Unfortunately.
I want to talk through the logic that I have on, like, how channeling would go on my end of things.
Yeah.
So my go-to when it comes to situations that, like, are a little bit unstable is to start with Rob, who has a lot of experience channeling in me. See how he's doing, and then hand it over to someone else. And so I would go Rob to basically canary the coal mine, and then go to Mantis.
Yeah.
If Rob falls over, he could just go sleep it off on the ship.
Right.
We both work with spirits. Some of them are on a spaceship. That's something we believe when methane isn't in the air.
Yes.
It's also something we experience. Like, this isn't, like, about belief. It's simply, at this point, observation.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
I don't really have good decision-making skills.
Well, none of us are.
None of us are?
None of us are going to have good decision-making skills.
Okay.
The entire rest of the sentence wasn't implied?
No.
That's amazing, because I certainly thought it was.
Nope.
So...
This is going to be fun to listen back to.
I'm going to check in with tarot cards first.
That's always a good idea.
I would check in with them telepathically, but I feel that because my line is already bugged,
Yeah.
it doesn't make as much sense. So, with tarot cards, how about Rob comes up next? Not Rob.
Why don't you read out the card for the,
Oh, I will.
Okay.
But first, let's just say not Rob. Is that
Yeah.
agreed?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's agreed.
It's the Ten of Swords, Rider-Waite Smith. So it's a guy stabbed in the back with 10 swords. I don't think he'll do well over here.
No, that's been historically accurate.
Yeah, I think you're correct. So, who would be suggested to come over on my end of things? I'm asking first. Do you want to do a channeling today? I didn't think so.
Nope. I do not want my first one to be this episode.
No. Not like this.
Not like this.
So, who to come over?
Red Rover, said somebody over. Uh-oh.
I've got the Fool reversed. So, well, that basically means everybody but Rob and Barbara.
Yeah.
We have ways of kind of understanding the entities we're working with, and that was a really big indicator that Barbara shouldn't come over.
Yes.
So,
I would say Jules or Mantis first.
yeah, you know, if we... Jules or Mantis for the first. Asking cards. I got a reversed Four of Wands. So, I don't really know what that means right now.
Clarification pull?
Yeah, clarification, please?
Maybe it's not a good time for any of them?
I got the Star reversed, so I guess not.
Okay.
I guess we shouldn't have guests today.
No.
If that's the case, that's the case.
That's the case, and it could just be a short episode of being like, hey, we're on methane.
Well, we wanted to... I wanted to read from the journal.
Yes.
And then we could kind of chart the difference in me. Because I'm going to get re-exposed.
Yep.
So, this journal, you can tell from its cover that something's going on with it. It's got a big Ouroboros, which is a snake eating its own tail, a symbol from alchemy, around infinity symbol. And then it says internal, eternal, eternal. Like a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so inside, it has like random quotes from books and random and important people. And otherwise, it's like blank pages with sort of dot grid on it. I started keeping this journal when we had to leave to a hotel because the house got so bad from the sewage flood, and I decided to use it to journal me reading a weird Christian fundamentalist book made to teach children about all of the keys to the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a lot of, like, the book, I still haven't really fully wrapped my hands around its throat.
What an evocative statement.
It was made by a man who was an illustrator and graphic designer, purportedly for his children to read to learn about the Legion of Christ that they would be joining. And
there was some deeply symbolic drawings that were in there that were not explained by the text at all.
Well, I just don't know where the shit this came from.
Yeah.
Like, so this is the 10 things that you're supposed to learn in this path of Christianity. I'm gonna read them out because I journaled all of this. Number 0, the key keeper. The gift of the keys, choice and warning. 1. The throne room key. Doctrine of God, the king's song. 2. The dust key. Doctrine of humanity, the image bearer. 3. The serpent key. Doctrine of sin, forbidden fruit. 4. The tomb key. Doctrine of Christ, the death killer. 5. Spirit key. Doctrine of Holy Spirit, muse, guide, and seal. 6. Gavel key. Doctrine of salvation, path of descent and judgment. 7. Temple key. Doctrine of church, bride of Jesus. 8. Throne key. Doctrine of last things, fulfillment of promise, life after death.
Wait, we got 2 throne keys?
The one before that was the temple key.
No, I meant at the beginning. I thought
that's the throne room key. Also, the throne is locked. First, you got to get into the room where it happened with a key.
And then you unlock the actual throne?
You have to unlock the actual dust, the fucking snake. All these things must be unlocked with a key. So, and after that, you get a scroll. It's the gift of the scroll. And the scroll is the name of God.
Okay.
It's the scroll of Revelation. It's like all the scroll and seal things in Revelation.
Oh, man. And the scroll, the last scroll unlocks, the last seal unlocks the
and there's a 7 and a 7 and a 7 and a 7.
The last scroll unlocks the 7 trumpets. And
did you know that this mythos was perfectly... Did you know this mythos was purposely designed to confuse people? Because it was. So I was just writing all this stuff down to kind of try to understand any of it. And then, let's see. After that, I decided to just straight up journal something. Easter Sunday in 2022.
Oh boy.
I'm going to read it out loud.
Oh boy.
It's hard to expect. Maybe expectation is the real problem. Anticipation. Prejudice. Prejudice is based on selective memory. Prejudice can predict or assume, but it can't know because it is a preventative act. Therefore, the true danger is never known. Mm-hmm. How to assume the best. Prejudice seems to be negative, but positive bias exists too. Nepotism, favoritism. Sharing means taking turns, but what if no splitting in half? What if we each get 100% because we share it all? How is this related to what it was talking about before? I don't know. What if we can grow it even bigger? Why accept limits we don't need? Then I have an infinity sign, and next to that is a rotated infinity sign that I've drawn as an hourglass.
Okay.
The next day, for 1822, which I have labeled, because previously it was Easter Sunday, I have labeled this one Bastard Monday.
All right.
Looking over the religious connections to the presidency.
This was in 2022, everybody.
Interesting, it went the way it went. This isn't quite readable. Something itself got exclusionary or exclusive. Oh, Christianity itself got exclusionary or exclusive around the 80s, Reagan-Bush era. Guess Bush started something that he tried to get W to finish. Father, Son, Holy Spirit equals who would that be? After that, I have a really creepy drawing of hands crawling out of someone's eyes.
So yeah,
to acknowledge God in Christianity is to acknowledge
its...
Nope, I like this sentence. To acknowledge God in Christianity is to acknowledge its demons and his sins.
Wow.
So, after that, it's a whole bunch of notes and drawings, like who else ate the fruit, bunch of different animals besides humans. And after that, it just gets crazier and crazier. I'm gonna stop. I feel head spinny, and I actually feel a little giddy. Like a little charged up. This is where I think the psychoactive stuff comes in. Like, it's easier to chase those psychoactive rabbits and the fantastical thoughts in this state. I think because
one thing I want to ask is, does that feel more important as you're reading it in ways that you can't articulate?
Sorry, I have a lot of phlegm happening. Not quite.
Okay.
I'm actually, the thing I'm noticing the most is that it's changing topic very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was interested in some of the things that were being written on Easter Sunday, and then swerve into something completely different, and then it just ends. There's not enough continuity for it. Like, conspiracy theory style, usually it gets more, you get kind of more into it as you go. It feels more important. But here it's like, the channel changes before you can even get into that.
Yeah.
And the rest of the book is like that. I tried to get back into making notes on the book, and then I would go into, like, stuff on the inner child and its interaction with the shadow self.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very interesting, and was also why I was ranting a lot online to people about how NFTs were real and definitely valuable.
Mm-hmm.
We all know how that went.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We had a lot of interesting times.
Yeah. So, like, I've been re-exposed. You probably didn't during that time.
No, but I am getting some knock-on effects just from some of, like, the empathetic, more psychic stuff.
Yeah, so, like, even if you don't get exposed to this, if you're a highly attuned individual to your psychic abilities, and you're around somebody else who's been exposed to a strange substance, they can have an effect on you.
Yeah.
What would you say the effects are right now?
Not as much the dissociative thing, but, like, definitely the, like, I'm feeling sort of minor exclamation points after some of the stuff that you've been reading. Like, oh, that starts to make sense. But I'm still cognitive enough to realize where stuff is sort of drifting off into Count Cuckoo Land.
Cloud Cuckoo.
There we go, Cloud Cuckoo Land.
Yeah. Yeah, what I'm noticing about it is it's like 5 different ideas all trying to come together into one.
Right. So
one thing I think was happening during methane exposure at the time that I was writing that is that several different influences were trying to communicate with me at once, completely uncognizant of each other.
Yeah.
And I would often be trying to, like, I kept this book specifically to write on that Weird Kingdom Keys thing.
Yes.
And there's so much in there that is not that Weird Kingdom Keys thing.
Right.
The interruptions were constant, and I didn't seem to have any control over what it was that I could write.
Right.
And I really, really tried. I really, really focused. And, like, this is different than normal times when I have a bit of difficulty with this. I have cognitive difficulties already because I have brain damage. But that brain damage is in, like, my language center. And it's always there.
Yeah.
The methane,
It almost seems like a temporal record skip.
It's really, really hard to keep track of, like, past, present, future style time. To keep track of the linear thought process. Very hard to form linear memories.
Yes.
I will probably not remember this conversation.
No.
Glad it's being recorded, because it's not. It did not land in the bucket.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, like, something as well that I also experienced. My short-term memory is absolutely shot when I get exposed to methane. So, yeah, I'm probably not going to remember much of this either. I am already forgetting parts of the beginning.
I mean, that's all right. We kind of did this to be able to log things to begin with.
Right. So
I do feel more settled now in terms of mood. Now, the fact that happened after I got re-exposure is a very eyebrow-raising, isn't that interesting moment.
Well, also, you've been taking herbals, like the St. John's wort, like, is probably helping to stabilize. We took steps ahead of time to make sure that this didn't turn into an absolute manic fest.
Yeah. I mean, so the St. John's wort is antidepressant in nature. And I think that the depression really got me the worst during any of the methane exposure. It has a different effect on me than I would expect. I sound angry when I'm depressed.
Yeah.
But, and that's not, like, people don't associate depression with anger.
Now, I almost felt like it was an anger towards yourself, like, why can't I do these things? Because one of the things that was really becoming a problem was you weren't able to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was getting very hard to go out.
And also just like an anger at like not being able to write the things that I was trying to write.
Right.
At the time, I had a lot of really good ideas about content creation that we're still trying to.
I mean, we're
trying to implement on.
We're finding like drafts and stuff that you were doing during that time. Whole videos that you recorded and put up on YouTube, and then like was making a Tumblr post about Occult Advice, and then it just sat in the drafts for years.
Yes, like I had a huge inability to post things correctly. Any type of interacting with electronics, interacting with like computer operating systems. Not only would there be technical glitches with them, like the temporal stuff was just affecting them outright, but also I'd have trouble actually operating, doing the things in order that was necessary to be able to even frickin' blog.
Logic interrupts.
It's pretty bad when it's hard to post to Tumblr.
Yes. So, anything else you want to bring up regarding your feelings post-methane exposure?
You know, I'm really glad that we did this episode because I have to do this more. Like, I have to get exposed to more methane to be able to open the boxes that contain our possessions, and we can take possession of the actual space we live in.
Right.
And this isn't so bad. There were some times when I was trying to record while I was opening boxes before to see if that would help to try to live cast, and I just didn't quite have it set up. I don't know if I would do that for every time when I was doing it, but well, we're doing this one together.
Right.
A lot of times during methane, I had a real protective urge to just like not have you involved in it at all.
Yeah.
Like have you in a different room, you go to a hotel or whatever, and then I would never be able to do the thing because I was alone.
Right.
So I'm feeling more like I'm feeling more capable of dealing with this state.
Awesome.
It's interesting identifying just how much depression was getting in the way, how much it was causing interference, because I usually assume anxiety is going to be my problem.
Right.
And depression is deceptively difficult to identify. And especially this kind of temporary onset depression, because talking to a doctor about depression, the question that I would always get is like, is this persistent? Is this all the time? Or is this just sometimes? And it's like, yeah, it's just sometimes, but when it happens, oh, crap.
Yeah. And to find out that it's like because of seasonal low-level exposure to hallucinogenic
Can we talk about how helpful doctors were with this?
Oh my gosh.
Doctors will not help you at all when it comes to methane exposure. Not only is there not a good test to tell them whether or not you're exposed, but they want to put you on an SSRI or they want to tell you to go away.
Yeah.
If the questions they ask when it comes to to depression, when it comes to anxiety, are shaped like the medications that they are trying to prescribe you. And if you don't have that, then they tell you to basically figure it out on your own. Like, why don't you go home and take a tea? But if you ask St. John's Wort specifically, they will not advise you whether or not you should take that.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm not dissing all doctors. I'm not even dissing doctors in general here. It's just that doctor appointments, the medical profession right now is set up in a way that they're not really allowed to advise you on stuff unless they have some kind of holistic qualification. If they are an actual naturopath or herbalist themselves, they're more likely to give you advice. But even then, the way that insurance is, the way the American Medical Association is, they're not empowered to give you information on how to deal with problems like this. They're empowered to give you information on prescription medicine.
Yeah.
Or getting surgeries.
Yeah. And it's very frustrating to try to get documentation for stuff like this. So, it's one of the reasons why it's hard for me, especially, because a lot of this exacerbates pre-existing medical conditions. So, and it's not really something that, like, mental health treatment is still very much behind in the way that it is not normalized. And so, like, basically having to take time off for a, methane exposure isn't as well understood as though, like, hey, I was picking up a box and I twisted my ankle.
Yeah. Like, when it comes to mental health in the office, usually it's okay if you take a mental health day.
Yeah.
And I don't know how people get over stuff in a day.
Just yeah, that's the thing, is like, I'm probably gonna need the rest of this week to, like, recover from the accidental exposure from today, because I'm gonna be dealing off and on with memory gaps, depersonalization, a lot of those type of things that come with sort of the reality break that methane causes in my head.
With this one, would you say, like, what level methane exposure did we get this time?
Well, I read it for about 15-20 minutes. It was rather close to my face.
Okay. Yeah. When you were reading it, I was walking around getting ready to go outside.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was constantly losing track of things and taking a long time to do it.
Yes. And we didn't realize until after I'd finished reading it and I was starting to exhibit methane symptoms that, hey, this book is full of methane. Though this is not the first time this has happened.
It has happened before, and we learned to just get rid of some books we had that were cheap and easily replaceable.
But some of the stuff isn't cheap or not easily replaceable, like in the matter of your personal journals.
Yeah.
Those are one of one.
And this is extremely important information to me, because it tells me what was happening to my brain during the exposure.
Right.
And some of these ideas, like some of the ideas that I was recording, were very interesting. Now, is it like highlighting one sentence inside of a paragraph? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that sentence, I think, is valuable. It's valuable to me to know what it is that I was thinking and doing at the time, because otherwise I have almost no memory of what was going on in my head. I do not remember writing a whole bunch of stuff in that journal.
Yeah. No, and like, I've had a similar experience actually last night. I was loading up one of the games on Steam, and I was like, okay, let me get back to my save. And there is a totally different save that is basically complete.
Oh, that you just played back in Methane?
Yeah. That
you just don't remember?
Even know about. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's very disconcerting or discombobulating whenever you discover clear evidence of you doing something that you have no memory of doing. It's definitely something that, like, we've had to sort of come to terms with individually and as, a couple, basically. Is that, like, there's going to be times where one or both of us don't remember something.
Like, couples arguments often are about things like, hey, why did you do this? And Like, imagine the other person just doesn't remember having done it. Or their reason for doing it is just completely screwball.
Yeah.
And that happened a lot until we basically got to the point where it's like, does it matter why we did it? Does it matter that it necessarily happened? Or does it matter that we just kind of go forward and chill?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we had to reach that point where it's like, it would seem important in other circumstances, but here I think it's just more important that we breathe fresh air and go on.
Yeah.
Like, I've often talked to you about how I've considered just taking these boxes and putting them in the dumpster.
Yes.
I know there's valuable stuff in there. But
a cat issue.
Yeah, I have a cat issue. She really likes these.
Oh,
I have important stuff in there. I have valuable stuff in there.
Yeah.
But it would be a lot easier in some ways to just say goodbye to all of it.
Yeah.
And
this is even after a year of having those boxes in a room with a fan constantly blowing out a window to air them out.
Yeah.
We're still dealing with individual items, mostly books, that still have this gas trapped in them.
They're very absorbent. There's books out there. Like, if you get a book, a used book, an old book, there's all kinds of stuff that can be in it. If it smells weird, there's probably weird gas in the warehouse it was kept. If it's a certain color of green, it's literally got arsenic.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's cyanide, because cyan.
Yeah.
That's the green. So cyanide was a component of some green dyes in the 1800s, maybe into the 1700s. And there's books that you can't touch without gloves because of their cover being literally poisonous to you, you the human, you the reader. So, like, these, I mean, obviously nobody's gonna buy my used books now. And also, I don't want to sell them.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to hurt someone.
Yeah.
So,
like, we had to make sure to throw away the books that we decided we could replace in a specific way so people didn't take them.
Guys, the Death Note manga got poisoned with methane. The Death Note manga was full of methane. Do you know how stupid funny that is? It's the death gas.
Yeah. So, we may bring up this topic again. I'd say this is probably a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, I wanted to do a special episode on it to kind of, like... We've mentioned the methane stuff several times during the podcast, and I think this is a good way to kind of archive, like, when we talk about the methane stuff...
This is what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Thank you for tuning in. If you do want to reach out, we do run Bad Occult Advice on Tumblr.com. Felix has live blogged some stuff that we turned out to be methane live blogging. He made a comic on methane exposure that I have put on reblogged to Bad Occult Advice several times. If you want to reach out, you can always send us an ask on Tumblr, or you can email us at badoccultadvice@gmail.com. The Bad Occult podcast is available live on Twitch, usually Sundays at 9 p.m. Obviously, this was a special episode, so it was like, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, so totally middle of the week.
My plan is that this is an unnumbered episode. I'm calling it a special edition or whatever, a special episode, and then if you look at it in the podcast archives, it's whatever's on the screen is on the screen.
Whatever's on the screen is on the screen, because I put it 6, so next episode will be 6.5.
It'll work out.
The real 6.
The real episode 6.
Yes.
So this here, if you look at it in the archives, titles wise, every now and then there's going to be a live special episode. That's going to be when we decided to just do something because something happened.
Yeah.
This time what happened is that we got poisoned!
We got exposed to methane. So, speaking of archives, we archive the video and audio version on YouTube, Bad Occult Advice on YouTube. Audio-only versions should be available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Substack. Battlecultdevice.substack.com, I believe. Something like that. So, we are having some issues with the RSS feeds, so this episode might not show up on those channels for a little while.
Well, so you know what happened. Is that
you figured it out?
Well, I've been reading through these books and journals for the past couple of weeks now.
Oh no.
So I think the reason I've had trouble getting the RSS set up is because methane makes it hard. So if you go to YouTube or Twitch, the stuff is there.
And methane is hard, so we still haven't gotten the Battlecold Apothecary on Etsy set up, but it will be there sometime, somehow.
We don't want to send you a packet full of this stuff.
No.
We want to send you a packet full of nice things.
Yes. I mean, it may say Battlecult, but we actually don't want to do mean things.
We have the best of intentions for you, truly.
So that is the end of another episode of Battlecult Podcast. Special episode on methane exposure. The mysterious episode 6 that is going to disappear.
Yes, and can I say, my head is spinning right now.
I see that. Yeah.
So I'm having, I think during the methane exposure, a lot of almost closer to the good feelings almost. Mm-hmm. Like the stuff that would make you keep on writing stuff, and now I'm having like the, oh crap, I gotta sit down. I feel like I'm on the twister.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to end the podcast here.
Just wanted to document that.
Nice last-minute document. So, yeah, this has been episode !methane exposure, Battlecult Podcast, with Tyler Cadmian, a.k.a. Shadow, and
Felix S. Warren, Esquire.
And we will see you in the next episode.
Later.